Welcome to the release video for PFaroe Release 2.86 that was released over the weekend 28th till 29th April 2018. Now in this release we have a few new additions to the risk module. Right now I'm looking at the attribution tab in the risk module, and you can see that there is a new methodology drop down. There are two options here. One is called individual VAR. This is the same methodology as has been used in PFaroe up until now. But there's also a new addition called component VAR. When I switched over to the component VAR methodology, the diversification term has vanished. And this is because the aim of this methodology is to actually distribute the diversification term across the components itself. So in the left-hand side chart, these components would be your attributions like interest rate and inflation. And on the right-hand side chart, these are your asset classes as well as the liabilities. The effect of this is that, for example, you can see more clearly any type of hedging behavior. For example, we're looking at the net risk. You have a big contribution to your VAR from your liabilities. A part of this is then being hedged by the fixed income section of your asset allocation. Now, previously with the individual VAR, this hedging benefit would have been explicitly included in the diversification term, but with the component VAR methodology, it is attributed to the fixed income component itself. More about the methodology is available in the risk and ALM methodology guides. You can find the link to those in the user guide. Now, this methodology has been added to the what if tool as well. The same methodology drop down is available here above your allocation. Now the default depends on what the default is set for your client or your organization. And this can be changed by simply letting our support team know that you would like to change the default. This is set by each run individually. So here my base scenario has been run with the component VAR methodology, but I can equally run it with the individual VAR methodology. This will produce values that have the explicit diversification term, and these also agree with the values that you would have seen in PFaroe this far. The default methodology choice also is reflected in the dashboard. Now we are also going to go through some of the additions in the March release, which have been in a limited release stage until now. First of all, let's have a look at the ALM module. We have added a new strategy type called multidimensional triggers. And similar to the funding level triggers, the multidimensional triggers is a dynamic allocation strategy, which means that you can set trigger levels that then define what the allocation is at each time steps, depending on what the scenario and the projection is. Here you have two dimensions, the familiar funding level, and the other one is the liability single equivalent discount rate. You can add new trigger levels simply by clicking or equally removing from these two buttons, and this works in both dimensions naturally. You can also paste in the trigger definition from an Excel template that you can download from here. So let me just have a go at that. I've actually already done this on another tab, so I'm in the same stage right now, but I have my pre-filled template here. As you can see, you have a list of available allocations that you have saved for this client and this date. And based on the description column here, you can fill in the trigger matrix hit copy and paste. And now it's validating that all the stochastic data is available for these allocations that you are using. So now you can see that my allocations have been loaded in, and these correspond to the equity and fixed income splits. Now, going to the next stage, you can define the de-risking only option of this projection. So previously you have only had that one tick box saying, do you want to de-risk only? But now that we have two dimensions, there are a few additional options for this. You can set a specific riskiness ranking between your allocations. Here you can see that my 30% equity and 70% fixed income allocation is deemed to be the least risky of all of these. And then the 70% equity, 30% fixed income is then the most risky. So this works in the order of number one is the most risky allocation. And this has been pre-filled based on the trigger matrix that you set up in the previous screen. However, you can rearrange these if need be. Now, what might be more common is to actually define the de-risking based on the dimensions. So for example, I can choose de-risking only on funding level. Similarly, for the discount rate, this is deemed to be that a higher discount rate is the less risky option compared to a lower discount rate. And I can also do de-risking only in both dimensions, which essentially applies both of these options at the same time. Or I can use a re-risking strategy, which means that regardless of the direction of movement, I will always move to the allocation that the trigger matrix is defining. Now I can finish this wizard by clicking Set Triggers, and I have now set that trigger strategy, and I can click Run. And equally this works in stochastic as well, just using the same exact logic, setting the triggers in the same way. Then looking into daily, there are a few additional functions that have been added, and more specifically these have to do with specific slices of your asset allocation. So for example here, this get asset value for classification is actually getting the fixed income part of your asset allocation, the market value of that at the given date. So if I just evaluate this at the end of March 2018, I can see that flicking over to the asset screen, that is this fixed income value here. For those clients that have an asset feed, this can also be made available straight from your asset feed, and that will be using essentially the fund definition that you are mapping your daily feed to. Now this functionality is dependent on pre-stored values for your daily values, so that instead of storing the aggregate asset value for the scheme, the individual asset class market values are stored. And this means that if you would like to use this functionality, then the daily values for that scheme would need to be rerun. So if you would like to make this functionality available for you, please let our support team know. Some other functions that I will not delve so deeply into are, for example, you can get the let's say spread or duration metrics for your assets. However, these are also dependent on the asset class level daily values being available. So to be able to use these functions, the daily values for that scheme would need to be reproduced. So if you would like to use any of these functions, then let our support team know and we'll make sure to help you. If you have any questions about any of these features, please contact us via support@riskfirst.com. Thank you for watching.